Welcome back to the Tournament Center. I'm Randy Buehler here with Brian David Marshall, ready to bring you the highlights of round 2. Brian and I watched all the feature matches. Some pretty interesting matches this round. We'll start on the match between Quentin Martin and Jeffrey Cerrone. You can get a lot more coverage of this from Ted Knutson, who's doing the text write-up of it, but the short version there, Quentin, top 8 at Prague, taking on Jeffrey Cerrone, the Pro Tour London champion. So both guys with a pretty good track record in limited. And it looked like
Jeffrey Cerrone 9-0.
Yeah, the only time it's ever been done. Now, you were saying in game 1 there was sort of a tricky card interaction that came up?
It was something that we also saw in New York in like our local playtesting group.
Okay.
Quentin suspended Aeon Chronicler, and he only had it suspended for a couple of tokens and drawing cards, and it's going to come into play on this turn, and he's going to have a 3/3.
Okay.
Except that he had a morph face down, which is Fathom Seer.
Oh.
And it's a really interesting combat trick. I've seen incidences where you attack with your morph and you block with your morph and your Aeon Chronicler, and then your morph suddenly a 3 toughness, not a 2 toughness. Your Aeon Chronicler gets +4/+4 from the cards in hand because it's a Amaro type card.
Right.
And so it was really interesting. And
so that's how Quentin won game 1?
It's more or less how Quentin won game 1. Actually, I think it looked like he won when he flipped a Coral Trickster to untap something that had been tapped by a Wrathy Trapper.
Sure.
But yeah, you get the idea.
Second game, Quentin also won, so Quentin Martin took the match. Second game, he was sort of embarrassed to win it. He had a Greater Gargadon, and he kept forgetting that it was suspended. Something would die, and he'd forget to sack it. And eventually, he was just scooped all his lands up, brought the Gargadon in, and smashed. That was good enough. So Quentin Martin moves to 2-0. Cerrone, the London champ, picks up his first loss of the weekend, so he's 1-1. Second feature match we want to talk about is the one between Antonino De Rosa and Tomohiro Saito. Now, you were watching the first game there, and it looked like there was some bad blood. What was going on?
It got a little heated. There was some question about whether or not Saito had passed the turn and wanted to do something at the end of Antonino's turn. Antonino felt he passed the turn, and the two players...
So Saito untaps.
Untaps, and it's like, oh, wait, I want to do something at the end of your turn. And De Rosa, obviously... He's not going to let that happen. They called the judge. And both players were definitely, slapping their cards around. And, there's a real atmosphere.
I was watching the second game, and De Rosa was like, can you get these guys' sleeves checked?
Yeah.
He's called for a sleeve check.
They didn't like each other. It was really obvious. And there was a real tension in the air around that match.
Now, Saito took that first game. But game 2, Antonino dropped a Stormbind. You've got Saito playing kind of a red-white slivers deck. Antonino's got a red-green and a couple of Nentuko Shamans, sort of a mid-speed. It wasn't super aggressive, but some card advantage, some Stormbind. That was plenty. And Stormbind I don't think Saito drew a 3 toughness creature the whole second game.
He was playing actually 3 color slivers. He had Sedge Sliver.
He had a splash of black. Okay, that's what the black was for.
So he had a little
that makes
black
sense. It looked like red-white. I saw the swamp. I guess it was for Sedge Sliver. Yeah. So then the third game, Antonino drew Stormbind again. And so Antonino took that match. They'd both lost the first round, so Saito's actually 0-2 at this point.
Wow.
Antonino's sitting on 1-1, a couple of games, all about Stormbind. The third feature match was probably the one that was the most interesting.
Very interesting.
Frank Karsten versus Thomas Didierjean. Now, Didierjean came out of nowhere to top 8 in Prague. Karsten, obviously you know Karsten, he's been around for a long time. What was the story in that match?
Well, in game 1, Karsten opened up with a hand, 4 lands, 3 spells, pretty solid looking draw.
Yep.
But it was his blue-white, low toughness guys.
Right.
And Didierjean had a Pyrohemia.
Oh wow, the red pestilence.
And he had a Pyrohemia and he had an Ether Flame Wall.
Okay.
Which is an 0-4. And he was able to just keep the Pyrohemia on the board and Dread Black, a little touch of blue for something. I'm not sure if I ever saw what that was. And
so Pyrohemia got the first game. I came in for the second game, and it was pretty interesting because Didierjean was beating down. He had Trespasser Ilvek, and he's coming in with a Trespasser. He's got a bunch of madness things. He's got sort of a red-black deck, and he would come over and he killed one Davenant Healer. He went to kill a second Davenant Healer from Karsten. Karsten goes to save it with Momentary Blink, but Didierjean discards Mutt Grub to the Trespasser to try to steal the Momentary Blink.
Madness it out.
Right, and to finish killing off the Davenant Healer, which was also a madness, was a Dark Withering. And so now their players, Karsten's like, it's the target player you control, does this work? No one was really sure. They got the ruling from the judge. It's just like another Pro Tour, another Momentary Blink ruling, right? It turns out that you can Mutt Grub a Momentary Blink The blink gets pointed at the muck grub, but then it fizzles because, of course, the muck grub is not a creature that you control.
So targets are checked on casting and then on resolution.
Exactly. When you play the blink, the target has to be legal, and when the blink resolves, the target has to be legal. But muck grub can jump in the middle and steal it and effectively fizzle it. So down went Davenant Healer. Trespasser keeps coming over. Karsten comes up with Davenant Healer number 3. Didier Jean serves. Karsten down to 2. Okay, Summoning Sickness is over. Didier Jean serves. Karsten pings it. Didier Jean says, you still take 2, right? He forgot about the ping ability.
Right.
He thought it was preventing a damage. And it was just like, he realized it. He's like, oh my, just puts it in. He's like, hand in his hands. I talked to him after the match. He was just like, the crowd got to him. There's so many people watching. They were lined up on the side of the feature match area. Huge crowd. He was like, I could feel Raphael Levy's breath on my neck.
I mean, this is a guy who his first Pro Tour was Pro Tour Kobe.
Right.
I mean, he played in the Grand Prix and he's played in PTQs for years, but
yeah.
I mean, he's still only 3 Pro Tours into his career.
So, messes that up. But, and Karsten stabilizing, he's like Fathom Seer, he draws cards, he's attacking.
Well, Karsten's side of the game was pretty interesting.
Yeah, let's actually look at this. This is something that Frank Karsten does that's kind of interesting. He keeps track of every single card that his opponent plays. Writes them down. It's sort of a good habit to be in, right?
If you're playing in the PTQs, you're playing, especially in a limited event, you definitely want to... These are the kind of habits you want to have.
Right.
Right? You want to make sure that you're marking cards down. You want to make sure that you know what to look for in the subsequent games. You don't want to have to just rely on your memory.
Problem was, the last card that Karsten wrote down, Damnation.
Yeah.
Damnation came off the top of Didier Jean's deck, swept the board. He had a creature back. He was able, he made a top deck to Halberdier, was able to finish Karsten off after sweeping the board with Damnation. So Didier Jean, a little nervous, made the mistake, but got the job done. And so that drops Karsten to 0-2.
Oh, wow.
So Karsten picks up his second loss. Didier Jean evens it up at a game apiece, and that's the story here at round 2. Kind of a fun round in the feature match area. Brian and I are going to go watch some more Magic, maybe bring you an update on the first pod that we were looking at with sort of the
some really interesting stuff happening with drafts and color evaluations, and I think we want to look at that also. Round 3 is getting started right here in the feature match area.
So we're going to go watch some more Magic, and we'll be back later with more here from the Tournament Center at Pro Tour Geneva.